Todd Graham does not mince words at Arizona State. He wants to win a championship. He talks about championships, first in the Pac-12 and then even national championships. The Sun Devils looked really strong last year, about as strong as anybody in the South Division, but lost to arch rival Arizona down the stretch. That cost them another trip to the Pac-12 championship game. Do they get back? Well, let's get some insight from Kaelen Jones of House of Sparky as we get set for the opening of 2015 with camp just about a week away. Kaelen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Mark. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's always a good discussion. Let's dive into some personnel. I know that you're very confident about the skills and abilities of Mike Berkovici in taking over for Taylor Kelly. This is not just a backup quarterback situation who received limited playing time. Win over USC, win over Stanford. He seems to be fully in place. What makes him a quarterback that Sun Devil fans have confidence in?
Well, I mean, you got to look back to last season, Mark, when he did step in place for Taylor Kelly last year. Obviously, you had the little hiccup in the first matchup against UCLA where he struggled and threw his 4 interceptions. But the following 2 games where he showed up against a very strong USC team and then again against a very capable Stanford defense that was ranked top in the nation. This is a guy who threw for 1,000 yards in the span of 3 games. And he really won over the hearts of not only the fans, but as a leader within the locker room, he kind of embodied that even when he had to step down from the starting quarterback position once Taylor Kelly returned to the lineup. I just think that what you get in Mike Berkovici, the fact that he's waited out his 5 years, and this is really his opportunity to come out and showcase his skill set, I think that he's going to take advantage of it to the fullest. This is a guy who has great arm strength, knows how to spread the ball around. And, you know, with the weapons that he has in place heading into this year, you get DJ Foster now on the outside. Would be nice to get Cameron Smith, but he's out for the year with the torn ACL. But you have guys like Ellis Jefferson and other receivers like Fred Gammage who are going to be able to step in and really showcase their skill set alongside Mike Berkovici. I think that what this does for the passing game as far as Arizona State is concerned is you're really going to be able to stretch the game vertically and with a very dynamic arm. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't get sacked a lot. He does a great job of standing in the pocket and spreading the ball around. So I think Berko's going to have a really good opportunity to be one of the top quarterbacks in the Pac-12 this year.
Yeah, you mentioned the arm strength. We know that he can complete a Hail Mary pass successfully, so that's big as well. You brushed upon the supporting cast and gave us some tidbits there. I'd like to dig in a little bit more. You mentioned, of course, let's start with Jalen Strong moving on to the NFL. So Superman's gone. Let's look at Cameron Smith. You mentioned the injury that knocks him out of 2015 after a 41-catch, 6-touchdown season. So that was significant. I'm interested in the situation with DJ Foster, a guy who catches more than 60 passes in back-to-back seasons out of the backfield, but also rushes for 1,000 yards, and how you're going to supplement that kind of switch in concentration and focus on his game and supplement that in the running game.
Well, originally DJ Foster was recruited as a receiver, and then they transitioned him back to running back, sort of between his freshman and sophomore year, I believe. But what this does for the running game is, like you're asking, Mark, Damario Richard last season, the true freshman, he comes back. He looked like he's going to be the feature back, and he's a guy that a lot of college football analysts and pundits around the nation believe is going to have a breakout season. And then on top of that, you have a guy in Kaelen Ballage last year, another true freshman, who is going to be that sort of power back in that 1-2 punch system between him and Damario. And then on top of that, you had Gump Hayes, I believe redshirt sophomore, who has tons of speed. He's going to be a phenomenal playmaker out of the backfield too. So I don't feel like the loss of DJ Foster, or not necessarily the loss, the transition of DJ Foster over to the outside is going to affect the running game too much. I think that you're still going to see him involved in the run game too. I mean, on sweeps and other motion back sets, I believe that you'll be able to see him still showcase his running ability. But it's just the fact that you have so much playmaking ability out of the backfield. This isn't a detriment. This is a chance, you know, for the other guys to really prove themselves and showcase their talents as well. And it just provides more depth for, you know, the ASU offense moving forward.
Richard coming off a freshman campaign, as you mentioned, with 487 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, and a big game against Utah and taking some carries away from DJ Foster there with 116 yards against the Utes, again, in his initial campaign in Tempe. We discussed Cody Cole when we had a number of Pac-12 bloggers step in and discuss some of the better players in the country, catching 16 passes with 4 touchdowns as a freshman, kind of shape up the receiving targets for us with the loss of Strong and now Cameron Smith as well.
Yeah, and Cody Cole, unfortunately, in ASU's offense, you don't, at least over the past couple seasons, you haven't seen too much involvement of the tight end sets or even the H-back sets. I know Damario Nelson, who graduated last season, served as the H-back last year, and kind of that tight end role was expected to have a more prominent role than what he did, but it just didn't happen with the fact that you're running the ball more often. It's a spread, multiple system offensively for ASU. I think that they're going to get back to maybe less of the read option because Berko doesn't have the same running ability and mobility that Taylor Kelly had. So you'll see more involvement of Cody Cole this season just based on that fact. You'll see more play action. But in terms of the passing game and who else can step up, I think, like you said, with the loss of Cameron Smith, one guy that in particular that I think is going to have a really good season is Ellis Jefferson. I think that I believe he's 6'4". He's a big body receiver, able to stretch the field. I think Berko's going to have a really fun time throwing the ball to him. You'll see a little bit of the involvement of back shoulder fade that we saw with Jalen Strong. I think that Berko drove that better than Taylor Kelly did, to be honest, while he was playing starting at quarterback last season. But I believe between Jefferson, Ellis Jefferson, and DJ Foster, and then on top of that you got a guy in Frederick Gamage who runs the slot extremely well. I think that ASU's passing game, you're going to get a similar output to what you expect out of the Todd Graham, Mike Norvell offense, which is around 3,000 to 4,000 yards, if not more. And I believe that's going to be a bit more efficient with Berkovici, and they may even surpass expectations with his passing ability.
Now, football fans tend to get enamored with numbers and with speed that produce the big numbers on offense, but it doesn't work consistently without the big guys up front. So where do you stand there?
Well, look, you have 2 All-Americans, or at least preseason All-Americans, not Evan Goodman, but he's another talented guy on that offensive line, but Nick Kelly at center, and then alongside him, Christian Westerman, who is one of the strongest offensive linemen in the country. I think that ASU, as far as the sack rate, I think that's going to dip again with Berkovici being a more efficient quarterback in the pocket. He doesn't run into trouble like Taylor Kelly used to. But at the same time, I think the running game is going to be a bit better too. This is a seasoned offensive line group. You have not only Westerman, but Goodman on the outside. V. Teofilo, who is also inside at the left guard position. And then I think the only question mark is really going to be on the outside with the tackle spots, with the loss of Jamil Douglas, who, again, was an absolute monster during his career there. They tried working Goodman during during spring ball, but he did have a hamstring issue. That gave an opportunity for Sam Jones, who's a freshman, to really come in and step up. And we'll see whether or not he can make a run for, or at least contend to be that starting on the outside of the tackles. But this is a very talented group. You got 3 seniors, or 4 if Goodman ends up starting, but who are projected to be there. But this is going to be one of the better offensive line units, believe it or not, in the Pac-12.
All right, Kaelen Jones from House of Sparky giving us his take on Arizona State football. Let's turn to the defense that was very opportunistic, led by Demarius Randall last season. A couple playmakers coming back. We talked again in our Pac-12 top 5 positional rankings about Lloyd Carrington, who came up from his defensive back position with 6 tackles for loss last year. Antonio Longino, who really finished strong, 9 tackles against Arizona, 17 in the bowl game against Duke at that linebacking spot after he averaged about 8 tackles per game last season. So who are some of those guys that we don't know about, or maybe some other stars that we're missing that are going to make this a solid defense?
Well, you definitely nailed it. I'm a big fan of Lloyd Carrington on the outside. I think he's one. I believe he was up for a few awards, at least preseason watch list. He's up for the Thorpe, I believe, another defensive award as well. So he's definitely one of the more renowned cornerbacks at ASU. Also, Jordan Simone, who broke out last season, finally earned his scholarship. He's a 5th-year senior as well. Just had his birthday yesterday, in fact, turned 23 years old. He racked up, I believe, 87 tackles, which is a high tackle rate, just like Demarius Randall was. So the secondary is pretty much returning all of their starters besides Demarius Randall, and then in that spot, or at the free safety spot, you're expecting either James Johnson or another guy to really step up. I believe that Johnson will end up being the starter there. But then within the front seven, besides Longino, like you talked about, he really came on towards the end of the year. Like you said, that 17 tackle performance against Duke was otherworldly. But in place of Marcus Hardison, who racked up 10 sacks last year, you're going to need some output from that pass rushing position. Edmund Boateng is someone to watch. He definitely could end up having a significant impact on that defense. But a guy that I'm really excited to see is Tashon Smallwood, the defensive tackle. Was a true freshman last year. The stats don't really tell it all. He only racked up, I believe, around 5 tackles for a loss, but he had 2 sacks, 20 tackles last season. But I think that the impact that he had surpasses the stat column. He really did a lot in terms of controlling the offensive line from that nose tackle position. I think that he's going to really be one of those players that steps up this season, where his stats back up his impact on the field. So definitely watch out for Tashon Smallwood. Another guy defensively, I think Demetrius Sherry will kind of fill in that role for Marcus Hardison, who, again, had 10 sacks, pretty much all of ASU's last year. But I think Sherry's going to have a very significant role next year within that front seven as well. But you're going to see a lot of rotation within that unit as well. You've got everybody pretty much returning. Last season, it was it was a unit where you saw 9 players on the defensive unit be put in the starting lineup. But this year, you're getting 9 starters returning. So it's definitely going to be different. It's going to be more stable in terms of consistency. You talked about it, Mark. They were an opportunistic group last year. But I think at the same time, that opportunistic mentality kind of got them into trouble too often. This season, I believe that you're going to see a bit more consistency. You're going to see ASU be able to really get after the passer and not give up too many big plays like they did last season.
Kaelen, I talked to you guys who have a beat on these teams to get the personnel breakdowns, but also to kind of get the pulse of not just the team, but the expectations and the community around the football team that is looking forward to big things come the fall. So Arizona State, if we went through the pantheon of college football, would be down a couple tiers. But there have been times throughout the history of Arizona State football, since it's become prominent back in the mid to late 70s, that it's jumped up and given us something to see on the national landscape. And it looks like this program is primed to do the same thing. It's an extremely difficult division. Possibly the toughest in college football. What are reasonable expectations? What's being talked about? I'm going to be interested to hear your take next week after you hear from Coach Graham at Pac-12 Media Days. But at this point, what do you think the buzz is around Arizona State, and in regards to expectations, realistic expectations for this football team?
Well, they like to believe realistic expectations are a national championship, but I mean, personally, I think that this is a team that could be in the 10-win range once again. This would be the 3rd year in a row that Todd Graham would have been able to manage the Sun Devils, or at least lead them to a 10-win year. And that would be something great that we haven't seen that type of consistency from any of the past ASU coaches, like you talked about. Even the Dennis Erickson era, you had that up year a few years ago, and then before he left, it kind of tailed off. But what Graham is expecting, I know that he wants the team to reach the championship. I'm all for it. But at the same time, you're looking at a schedule that you got to get the win against Texas A&M to open up the season. Otherwise, that really kind of sets you back. ASU will be playing USC, UCLA, Utah, Oregon, Washington, Arizona to finish off the year. So you got to be able to have realistic expectations heading into this year. But I had them at the 8 to 10 win range. I believe 9 would be, the over/under if I was going to bet. But I think this is a team that realistically they can end up winning the Pac-12 South again. It's just a matter of, again, being opportunistic and winning the games that they're supposed to. When they play to their highest capability, ASU last year, they were outscoring opponents in their wins 39 to 22, but in their losses, they were getting outscored by opponents 46 to 30. So if ASU can play to their highest capability game in and game out, then they should be able to, play up to the level of a top 20 team. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they ended up coming away with 9 to 10 wins. But again, the buzz in Tempe is national championship expectations. It's the senior unit, a team that returns, I believe, 16 starters altogether projected heading into this year, and then 12 of them are seniors. So this is a team with high expectations.
I love the date to open things out at Kyle Field against Texas A&M. There's going to be 102,000 rabid Aggie fans there to meet the Sun Devils, and that's going to be not just a huge test, but it's going to be a lively environment, and it's going to be a fun game to watch because there are athletes and speed all over the field on both sides of the football. So that's going to be an entertaining game, and I would be shocked if it's not. And these are the type games that Arizona State, as you mentioned, needs to win on the national scene for the Pac-12 and for themselves. But also at the same time, I credit Arizona State throughout their history. Whoever's been in charge has typically not shied away from these kind of games, and they've gone out and played these kind of games, whether you go all the way back to the 90s and taking on the Nebraskas of the world, or in recent years, it's been Notre Dame. So, all right, good stuff from Kaelen Jones, House of Sparky. Hopefully we can flag you down around Pac-12 Media Days next week, but appreciate it as always, Kaelen.
Thank you, Mark.